Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to the Center for American Progress. My name is Angela Kelly, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for American Progress's Action Fund, and also an SVP here at CAP. I appreciate that you all made it. I'm sorry that we don't have hard hats for you, but thank you for enduring the construction. I've had the privilege of being at CAP, and this is my second tour of duty. I was here from 2009 to 2014 as the Vice President for Immigration Policy. So the issues that you're discussing today are near and dear to my heart for many reasons. In any case, welcome to today's event, Harnessing the Talent of DACA and Unauthorized Students, What's Working in K-12 Policy and Practice. So my job is to set the stage for today's conversation and to introduce a keynote speaker. And in thinking about how do I frame this discussion, what occurred to me is that there's really dynamics happening at three different levels. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about each of those. So first, across the policy issues at the national level. The second is the impact of these national levels and local policies. And then at the local level, how those policies push up to the national stage. And the third level is sort of this like person-to-person, like reality of what's happening between people. So let's start at the first level, which are the central policy issues behind today's discussion are immigration and education. And these are two policy topics that have a lot of intersectionality, right? Because you've got over 2 million immigrants who are living in the U.S. without papers, who've been here their entire childhood. These are kids who go to school, and along with living with the daily strain of getting through the day because they don't have work authorization, because their parents aren't here legally, they also have to deal with the patchwork of education policies. Let's start with immigration, though. So in the immigration space, there are about 713,000 unauthorized youth that have applied for DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. And this is an initiative that many of you are familiar with, where people can qualify for a temporary reprieve from being deported, and they get work authorization. It's tough to qualify for this, and it's temporary. But it's proven remarkably successful in improving the quality of the lives, and really all our lives, of those who've accessed the program. Our own research finds that these young people who've received deferred action and work authorization, on average, they've seen a 45% increase in their wages. And that increase in their wages helps all of us. They pay more in taxes, they spend money, and that generates economic activity across the economy for all of us. In the educational context, 92% of these DACA young people have been able to pursue educational opportunities that before that they couldn't. But DACA isn't a panacea for those who have it or for undocumented youth generally, because they're operating in a system in the education context, the second policy area, where some states offer in-state tuition to undocumented students who graduate from their high schools, some don't. And in the K-12 context, a lot depends on where you live as to what sort of support you receive. And there's a lot of change in the kindergarten through 12 education context. Federal policy is changing tremendously. There's a huge shift from the No Child Left Behind law that governed for many years with a high focus on testing to the legislation that just passed last December. We don't know how it's going to be. The Every Student Succeeds Act, which offers a more nuanced approach for states, for districts, for localities, for schools, to adjust to their own realities of the students in front of them. So we're talking about at this meta level, these two salient policy issues that each have their own dynamics, and they intersect heavily with vulnerable children right in the middle. The second stage, the second dynamic that I want to talk about for just a second is what do these impact of these policies have at the local level? And today we have the honor of, in our presence, is Assistant Professor of Education from Harvard, Roberto Gonzalez, a long-time dear friend of mine, and he's really done a remarkable thing. 12 years ago, he got the idea, wow, there is a shift in this country, and I want to study it. And so he looked at unauthorized youth in and around Los Angeles, and he captured his observations about them in his new book, Lives in Limbo, Undocumented and Coming of Age in America. And his findings focus on undocumented youth and how do they do in that difficult transition that we've all had to go through, right? From being adolescents to being young adults. And not surprisingly, what he found is that their life experiences, how far like we all come, isn't determined just by our own will, right? It's not just by how hard I study or how good I am, but it's by the support that we find in the people around us. And it's in the conditions and the space in which we're given to grow. The other participants in the discussion that are follow, our keynote speaker, who I'll get to in just a minute, they live this experience every day. The other speakers on the panel are a teacher in a dual language charter school from Georgia. They're the assistant superintendent of the Office of English Learners and Newcomer Assessment and Counseling Center. How do you fit that on a business card? From Long Island, and from Boston, sorry, and a principal of a high school from Long Island, New York. So they live every day what Dr. Gonzalez has studied, and they're going to talk about that. So we'll get to peer in on what their lives are like of dealing with this population. And so finally, at the last level that this conversation is happening, it's a me to you. It's a person-to-person level. And too often the debate, particularly in the immigration context, that's the one I know the best, is abstract. It's about the other. The immigration debate is about a number, and that dehumanizes. These issues are not about scary statistics. They're about people's stories. And here's the story of our keynote speaker, Dr. Emma Violen Sanchez. So she came to this country when my grandmother sent her as a 16-year-old. She came to the U.S. to study, and she joined my mom, who had come here a few years before. Her 4 sisters followed in time. It's really hard not to cry. My Aunt Emmy, as we call her, is the chair of the Arlington County School Board. She was elected to the board in 2009, and when she was, that was a story that every newspaper across Bolivia carried. A country intensely proud of her, as so am I. My aunt supposedly retired in 2007 after serving for decades as a supervisor of the ESOL HILT program in Arlington County. She created and kept recreating a program for immigrant youth in Arlington, and she's never stopped serving. She created out of her living room the DREAM Project that helps undocumented high school grads access higher learning through scholarships, through mentoring, through advocacy. She's helped so many find their dream. And so, as my role model, and the most tremendous of all my tias, and I have a lot of aunts, I am honored to introduce my aunt, Dr. Emma Violen Sanchez.
Thank you very much. And by the way, it was a surprise to Angie that I was invited to come today. So here she is introducing me, so I'm very honored to speak. At the Center for American Progress, it is an institution that I respect, that I always go to for shaping the national debate on immigration. And I'm, of course, delighted to meet other educators and Dr. Roberto Gonzalez, who I look to him and to his research as a guidance to many of us who are in the field to guide us as we try to help our dreamers. Yes, I think Angie told you that I'm a dreamer. And I came without my family. I did have my older sisters. But what made the difference in my life is that I came to a family, the Powelsons, who from the beginning, I came as a senior in high school. From the beginning, even though I didn't speak English, they said, Emita, you have to go to college. And that 1 year in high school, which was a very difficult year, Dr. Powelson tutored me and helped me, and fortunately I was able to receive a 4-year scholarship at Radford University. And it was a time that I could get a Social Security, and it was a time that I got a foreign student scholarship and a work permit to work. That's not what is happening right now. And in my role as a school board member, but more than anything as an advocate for English language learners, I just want to tell you a little bit about Arlington. I'm very proud of Arlington. It's a school system, highly diverse, enrolls to 25,678 students, pre-K to 12, 1/3 of our students are English language learners from 96 countries who speak 81 languages. We are a majority minority school district. 47% are white, 28 Hispanic, 10 African Americans, 9 Asian, and about 5% others. And I'm very happy to see in the audience Dr. Brenda Wilkes, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services and Special Education, and also the Supervisor for Counseling. That speaks very highly of our staff that continues to support our students. But one measure of an effective school division is how it prepares for students for college. And yes, we are proud that in Arlington, 92% of our students graduate from high school, and that our high schools are in the top 3% of school divisions. And one of the things that I am most proud that as a supervisor of English as a second language, we started a program for older English language learners, students that were 18 and older. And we are proud that in the Arlington Public Schools today, there's 300 students that are older than 18, and they can stay in high school until they graduate. There is no age limit. That is a first for us to believe that all students, all residents, should be able to access a high school education. Yes, we are a high-performing school district, but there are major challenges and gaps, especially with our English language learners. And our immigrant families and community and students in Arlington face so many economic challenges because it's a very expensive place to live. But yet they arrive on day in and day out from Central America and from different countries. Yes, I think that we believe that higher education is key for effective economic competitiveness. Therefore, I believe that it is imperative for us at the local school level, at the state level, and at the national level, we implement policies and practices that help dreamers to gain access to higher education. One of my favorite quotes from Margaret Mead, it was when, as Angie mentioned, that we got together in my living room. And as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. It is the only thing that ever has. And for me, if there's one thing I am proud of, is that we started a very small nonprofit organization called the Dream Project. And I'm very happy that here in the audience, we have some of our volunteer board members, we have 2 Dream Scholars, our mentoring coordinator, and all of those associated with the Dream Project. Could you please raise your hand? Thank you. Thank you for all you do. And yes, the Dream Project began with parents and students like Jareth Andrade, who you are going to meet. Her parents and others, they could not bear to see Jareth and other students to see that the academic achievements, they were undermined at the barriers of being undocumented. This was in 2010. At that time, these students were graduating from high school, and as Roberto Gonzalez terms a transition to illegality, afraid and powerless. So the parents and students and some educators, we came together to be a force of change. And Pamela, who is also now the supervisor of counseling, was also sitting in my living room. So when the Dream Project began, there was no deferred action. Students were terrified to discuss their immigration status. Yet for them, when they got together in the living room, the students and the parents, they felt strong. They felt empowered. And because at that time, it was the Attorney General in Virginia that wanted to deny admission to all undocumented students for state colleges. And that was the time that they felt that they didn't have any safe way, because then later we worked so that they could attend some schools, but they had to pay out-of-state tuition. But through the DREAM project, we empower students whose immigration status creates barriers to education, but we also believe that they needed to have some mentoring. I don't know if Hareth remembers going to the dorm of a college student at Georgetown and getting some assistance in completing her college applications. Currently, 90% of our current DREAM scholars are from Latin America. We have 71. Dreamers from South Korea, Mongolia, Ethiopia, the Philippines, and it reflects the diversity of dreamers of Northern Virginia. But in order for this program to be successful, we had to work with parents and students. And I think that this is one of the distinguishing features of our program, because we work as a communities. And how is it that we started to dissolve the boundaries? So for these students, for them, they were courageous, and we took the chance at the Unitarian Universalist Church. 4 students got up and they shared their stories. At that time, the stories were very emotional. I remember when we had a Dream Summit, and Hareth, who is here, she left the podium crying in the middle of our Dream Summit, where she and other students were proudly stating, "I'm undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic." And yes, these were the courageous students that stood in front of more than 100 educators, parents, and students that said publicly that they were unafraid. So it is liberating to tell your stories, but they have to feel protected. So currently, we have awarded 71 and continued scholarships for our students right now. They fought, and in April 2014, I remember very clearly that day when I picked up the phone and I called Hareth and 4 other dreamers, or was it 3 dreamers, that were in Los Angeles in a conference, and we were crying, letting them know about DACA. I think my niece, Angie, gave me and says, watch tomorrow morning. And so I woke them up in Los Angeles, and we were all crying. We were calling the parents, and we were all crying to the idea that these students could have DACA. So in the changing legal landscape of immigration politics, it was elected officials, school administrators, teachers, counselors that started, and we got together. And as a result of that, we have, it's tiny, I know, there's hundreds of thousands. But we can say that after these 6 years, 93% of our DREAM scholars are enrolled in the university. That beats all the odds for low-income students that only about 12% stay in college. 93% of our dreamers are still in college, and the first group graduated. And this is something that was unbelievable, that students could graduate in 4 years with only $1,000 scholarship. That's all we gave. But through the mentoring, they were able to get other scholarships. So it was a transformation network. It was from silence to advocacy. And this also became visible when Governor McAuliffe became the governor of Virginia. And we were invited for the first time in Richmond. I don't know if you all know the Commonwealth. In Richmond, we had the DREAM Project marching in the inaugural parade, stating who we are the DREAM Project, because we didn't have a band, and we realized that it would cost us $1,000 to rent that bus to take us there. But anyway, one of our, who is currently and I will never forget, that's the way we operate. Sometimes in church, I have the prayers of the faithful, and I ask for $1,000 to help a kid go to college. But anyway, it was one of our parents who, another person whose wife was dying, and before she died in December 27. On December 25th, she came, the husband came with a check for the bus to go to Richmond. Yes, the DREAM Scholars became advocates. Yes, we are a small organization, but we all believe that we can work together and we can help our dreamers share their stories, help them. And we would like to recommend that any nonprofit can support this, and we can work together not only with the community, but also to universities. We have a strong collaboration and partnership with George Mason University, Northern Virginia Community College, Marymount. We have right now with us Joel Juarez. Could you stand up, Joel? Joel came from Guatemala, an accompanied minor, crossed the border. He right now goes full-time to Marymount University, and he has a track scholarship. And he is right now as a sophomore. So we are very proud. But I would like to close now, because for us, for the DREAM project, it is the voice of our students that inspire us. And Jareth Andrade, would you please come? She was inspired to write this poem when her father was facing deportation procedures. So, Jareth, please.
Well, thank you, Emma. It's an honor to be here. I don't write a lot of poems, but this poem in particular was very special to me because I was in between an internship right down the street at the AFL-CIO, and my dad was in deportation proceedings. And so I just would type my feelings on the phone and never thought I would share it. But eventually it got to be included in this really cool book called the Dreams Deported book, and it's a collection of stories of dreamers and our fight against deportations. So it's called America. America, we need to talk. Don't be afraid and stand, because we believe this is the year that the dreams of my parents will be realized, and the dreams of millions who came and crossed borders unimaginable to reach the land of opportunities. A story comes to mind of a little girl's dream to become a spokesperson, and she did not mean to take anything, let alone make a scene. She was just trying to fit in. Yet by age 15, treated like she was a sin, illegal. Placed in a category, a shelf, a cell, incarcerated in the words, sentenced without conviction. Alone, she would crumble. Yet the dream kept her humble, and she built a suit of armor to join the fight. Empowered by the liberation, we the people must build a suit. Let's go on and tell them, while they who have the power sit, separating us as they see fit, while my father's hands blister from work all day and he doesn't feel like he has a say. As this nation, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, rises with 11 million dreams, America, we are liberated by the pain. So let's talk, because America is home, a land of dreams for all dreamers. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining us here today. Thank you, Angie, for the great introduction, and Dr. Viola Sanchez for that fantastic keynote, and Jareth for that powerful poem. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm Scott Sargrad. I'm the Managing Director for K-12 Education Policy here at the Center for American Progress, and I am just incredibly excited for the panel discussion that we have here today. Thank you all so much for joining us. We have a remarkable group of people here, some lifetime educators, and a brand new teacher, which we're very excited about. So let me start with a few introductions. So first of all, immediately to my right is Dr. Roberto Gonzalez, who is one of the nation's leading experts on immigration reform, and undocumented and unauthorized youth, and the author, most recently, of the book Lives in Limbo, which we have for sale outside here today. It's a really remarkable book and some really powerful stories, so I'm excited we'll get to talk about that. Next to Roberto is Yemi Cambron, who is a 5th grade teacher in dual language charter school in Forest Park, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. She's a teacher through Teach for America and part of the DACA Corps. She's also an artist who won the Grantmakers Concerned with Immigration Reform's 2014 Grand Prize. And Yemi moved with her parents from Mexico to Atlanta at the age of 8 and didn't realize that she was unauthorized until she was denied an art prize at the age of 15. Next to Yemi is Dr. Francis Esparza, who is the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of English Language Learners, the Newcomer Assessment and Counseling Center, and the Translation and Interpretation Department in the Boston Public Schools. Before Boston, Dr. Esparza was a longtime educator and spent 24 years in the Los Angeles Unified School District as a teacher in bilingual classrooms, a facilitator and advisor for English language learner programs, and a school principal. And then finally, we have Richard Lochner, who is a principal and previously an assistant principal, and a longtime math teacher, math department chair. He's currently the principal of Brentwood High School in Brentwood, New York. Brentwood is actually one of the largest schools in New York State. It's serving more than 4,500 students, which is actually an increase of more than 900 over the past 6 years. Brentwood is 78% Hispanic and 79% economically disadvantaged. So we're really excited to have Rich's experience as a school leader here. So just to start off, we're going to have a discussion with our panel, and then we'll get a chance to take some questions from the audience. But to kick us off, I was wondering, Roberto, if you could just talk a little bit about your research and what you found in your book, Lives in Limbo.
Yeah, sure, Scott. And it's really great to be here, and thank you all for coming. So essentially, the book is based on, and as Angie said earlier, on a 12-year study. So I spent 12 years following a group of 150 undocumented young adults in the greater Los Angeles area. So we started when they were at kind of mid-adolescence, and many of these young people are now in their late 20s, early 30s. So the book really focuses on really critical transition periods at adolescence and young adulthood, and then into, as I mentioned, into the 20s and 30s. Kind of the big take-home here is I argue that illegality or undocumented status is a master status. Put in plain words, it's a binding constraint, a lead weight, if you will, that for many of these young people, that no matter what their initial advantages might be, how quickly they may have gotten out of the gate, this is a lead weight that eventually brought many people down. And many of my respondents, as they moved into their late 20s, early 30s, found that they had very little options left, and really the most salient feature in their lives was their status. But these processes start much earlier. They're much more local. And so what in keeping with the theme today of kind of K-12 schools, I trace what I call this transition to illegality. And very, very quickly, what this is, basically, these are young people who, due to a Supreme Court ruling in 1982, are absorbed into the legal framework of this country through K-12 schools. As a result, they grow up side by side with American-born friends and peers. They grow up to the Daily Pledge of Allegiance. Their teachers encourage them to work hard, to dream boldly, to play by the rules. This is our American dream. But as their friends move forward, right, getting driver's licenses, taking after-school jobs, thinking about college, getting financial aid for college, many of these young people have no choice other than to stand still and watch as their friends move forward. This has tremendous consequences as these young people hit barriers and also move into a status that's highly stigmatized in today's society. And as a result, a lot of young people withdraw. They withdraw from teachers. They withdraw from social groups. Right? This has tremendous implications for their lives moving forward.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think that's a sort of good lead into some of the other questions here. Yemi, can you talk a little bit about your experience sort of at that time with this transition, and what were some of the things that really helped you get to where you are now?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm just going to start by telling you guys why we came here in the first place. For many years, up to when I was 8 years old, our family was kind of divided, torn apart. My father was here working in the kitchens of Chinese restaurants to support us because he didn't have work in Mexico. So he crossed the border back and forth, risking his life. And so my mother pretty much raised us single-handedly, and she would sell tortillas at home by the pound just to like make ends meet. So finally she gave my father an ultimatum, and they decided to uproot. And together with my 2 younger siblings, I was 8 years old, we crossed the border. We had said it was only going to be for 5 years. It's been 15 years. So I came into, we arrived in March. I came into the 3rd grade in the DeKalb County public school system in Atlanta. And I think it was just, I didn't really realize the implications of my status. It wasn't kept from me. My parents told us right before coming here we were going to be mojados, which is, well, I'm not going to translate it because in English it's more of a derogatory term. But they never shielded us from that. We knew that, what our status was going to be. But as a 3rd grader, not understanding the language around me, that's the only thing I could worry about. I was jealous, frustrated of the kids that could read, and I guess that frustration kind of pulled me through. By the 5th grade, I was the top of my English or my literature class, which was an advanced class. And I just kind of took off from there. In middle school, I had a teacher who was a mentor of mine, and she just looked out for me and made sure I was in the right classes and just kind of made sure I was always doing well. And so when I got to high school, I was like, oh, that's the way to go. I need to get a mentor. And my first year there, probably the first or second day, my literature teacher, Ms. Vax, asked us to write journal entries. We were doing that every day when we came in. And so my first journal entry, I asked her to be my mentor. And she said yes. So she mentored me and looked out for me. And her husband, who was also a teacher there, was the soccer coach. And I was in the soccer team, and they just both really helped me. And Ms. Vax, was a teacher that was with me when I entered an art contest after reading Elie Wiesel's, I hope I'm not pronouncing his name wrong, Night.
Right.
And so after reading that book, there was an art contest hosted by the Capitol, the Georgia Capitol. And so I entered it, I got 3rd place. I went to the Capitol for a ceremony with my mother and my mentor, Ms. Vax, and I was the only Latina there. And I mean, being in a political, the Capitol, I was nervous because I knew I was undocumented. And after the ceremony, my teacher went to claim my prize, and they told her that I couldn't get, it was $50 or something like that. I couldn't get it because I didn't have a social security number. So I think that's when it really hit me. And it just like everything clicked, and I realized, okay, that's what it means that I'm undocumented. So I don't have these numbers, and I can't do certain things, even if I have the talent, even if I have everything that I need, I don't qualify. I don't, it's very limiting. It was kind of a slap in the face, but it was eye-opening. And so with the help of my teachers, when I was applying for college, I had a lot of guidance. And even though my teachers I don't think they knew what they were doing, they went out of their way to reach out to admissions and to make something work. I applied at Agnes Scott College, which is a private all-women's liberal arts college in Decatur, Georgia, really close to Atlanta. And they awarded me a private scholarship for all 4 years, full ride, didn't have to worry about anything, which was such a blessing. But from the beginning, I think I was placed in that track of like, this is a good student, and we need to make sure she gets there. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great to hear about. I mean, I think staying with that idea of sort of mentors and individual teachers who are providing support and can really provide the counseling or whatever it is that young people need. It's something, Roberto, you talk about a lot in your book, but maybe we could talk a little bit about some of those other structural supports that K-12 schools and districts can put in place. So Francis, Richard, can you talk a little bit about what you've done to put some of these supports in place?
Francis.
Well, as you've mentioned, my background is from Los Angeles, and in Los Angeles, as a paraprofessional, as a teacher, as a support provider in the English learner office and a principal, there are always supports put in place for our undocumented students and for all our English language learners, our newcomers, so on and so forth. And coming here, now being the assistant superintendent in Boston, what we're trying to do is open up opportunities. Opportunities for our students with limited and interrupted formal education that come from other countries, many of them undocumented, for our English language learners, and just providing those pathways for parents and families. We've created a district English language advisory committee so parents can come and voice their opinions, and it doesn't matter if you're an immigrant or not. It's just that you have a student enrolled in our district, and we want to hear your voice. We want to know what it is that you need and what is needed at the school site, what supports are needed. We're providing a college fair for undocumented students, and we're highly supported in Boston by DACA. And so together we're able to create with our high school assistant superintendent and their staff a huge event that will take place April 21st in Boston, where our undocumented students will be able to come and get supports for funding college, for applying at different colleges. And you also mentioned I am the director of the translation services. So everything is done in Boston in every single language that is needed. We have 9 languages that we service, but we work with different organizations to make sure that our over 100 languages are available to our parents and our students. We provide different courses. We provide programs, and I've brought some pamphlets on the different instructional programs. So our students who come to us speaking another language, such as Spanish, Cape Verdean is one of our most popular languages, as well as Haitian Creole. We're able to provide those language supports in the classroom. So we have SEI language specific. Students are receiving those supports as they move through the grades. We also offer dual language programs, and we'll be opening up in 17, 18 dual language programs in Cape Verdean, in Haitian Creole, hopefully in the year after, Vietnamese and Somali, and grow as we can to support the language needs and the needs of the communities that are in Boston. We also connect all our families as they come in to register their students with a community-based organization, and that community-based organization will serve that one community mostly. They'll serve everyone, but they speak the language of the parent and the family coming in. So we do provide lots of supports. Again, we've created a pathway for them to receive special education services if needed, mental health services, counseling services, housing services, legal services, and counseling them on their educational and immigration rights if they want that information from us.
I think it's remarkable. In Boston, a relatively small city, has this diversity of languages, all these issues that you need to deal with, and the translation supports just seem pretty incredible. I mean, to be able to provide it in 9 languages for the district and then more than 100 with the partners, that has to be just huge for the parents and the community. I mean, Richard, you also have for a lot of folks coming from different countries, right? And you had a big increase recently. I mean, are these some of the same things that you're doing at the school level?
Yeah, we're doing many similar, we have many similar programs that Francis was just speaking about. I mean, just if I can just speak a little bit about Brentwood, it's a fairly unique place. I think you described it accurately. When I took over as principal about 6 years ago, and as you said, I was the assistant for many years, we had about 3,600 students. Again, the makeup was, as you said, about 76% Latinos, mainly from South America. And since DACA, we've seen an incredible increase. Now, Brentwood has typically been a town where immigrants have come from in the 70s. It was one of the largest Puerto Rican cities outside of San Juan in America. So we're very used to having immigrants pass through. And I have to say, this incredible growth from 3,600 to 4,500 has been terrific in many respects. You know, I love each kid dearly, and I think they're tremendous. And I have to say, the students from South America, mainly, we get many of our students from El Salvador. A lot of the Caribbean countries come through Brentwood. I have to say they're wonderful. They really are. And what I love in particular about them is the way they appreciate so much, you know, what we have to offer. And I have an opportunity really every day to walk into their classrooms and see how dedicated and how focused they are, and you know, as I say, how much they appreciate you know, their teachers and their school. But that doesn't come without problems, and that's one of the things we spoke about a couple of weeks ago on the phone. I worry about these kids tremendously because we do have quite a few, as I say, came from South America, and many of them are living with, you know, relatives that may or may not be their father or mother. They might be with a different, you know, might be an extended family member or not even a family member at all. So what I'm seeing as the principal of the high school is we need to offer quite a few supports to these particular students in order to have them become successful. And that's my big fear here, is that although we offer them so many different opportunities, that they're suffering as 15, 16, 17-year-olds. As I say, many of them have a sense of abandonment because they've left their country, they've left their mom and dad home to live, to chase the American dream. And we have to, as a school, and obviously why we're here as a nation, to support these kids. And as I say, they have many, many problems to overcome. One of them, you know, Yami was speaking about college. One of my student workers just a year ago, it was just a year ago, she, just a terrific kid, didn't even realize she was an undocumented student. She's about 17 years old at the time. Her parents kept it from her, or just it never came up, really, until she started the application to college, and realized that she couldn't apply to certain colleges and universities that she had hoped for. As Roberto mentioned, she had this tremendous dream. We talked for years before this about her wanting to go to college to become a doctor. And boom, it hit her square in the face that she did not have the same opportunities as other kids did. Thankfully, we worked in a private university locally, also offered her a full scholarship. But that's a very isolated case. Many of the students, as I said, they don't have the support at home that most students have. A mom, a dad, you know, a family, a cohesive unit. So what I'm finding is that there's a significant amount of students who have traveled to us as 16, 17-year-olds, and they're not equipped to face the challenges that you know, a student who was born here in America and with you know, a regular nuclear family doesn't have those challenges. They do, and what I'm seeing is quite a few students, you know, are unfortunately, you know, when they don't have the proper supervision in the afternoon and the evenings, they you know, they can get into some difficulties. So that's where I am as a high school principal dealing with this issue. I think it's an exciting time. I really do. I'm thrilled with DACA. I think it's been a great opportunity for our kids. I hope it progresses even more. But at the same time, I think as educators, we have to recognize that these students need a tremendous amount of support. And you mentioned before, and Francis spoke about it, we do have quite a few supports in school. We have the bilingual social workers and school psychologists and guidance counselors, but more is needed.
Yeah, I think that connects back to, Roberto, another theme in your book, talking about the example that Richard gave in his story, but that the difference between what you call the college goers and the early exiters is often really small, and it has less to do with the young people themselves and more to do with the supports and the structures that are in place, if they're lucky enough to have a mentor, if they're lucky enough to be in a school or a district that provides these supports. But what are the things that really need to be in place at the K-12 education system, but more broadly for more unauthorized students to have success?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think that it really picks up on the thread so far here, and that is that much of the national conversation about undocumented young people has really been focused on access to college and access to high-skilled jobs. And these are really important issues, to be sure. But this debate, defined very narrowly, what it's done is that it's really obscured what it means to live in a low-income family, what it means to have a parent that's undocumented, what it means, the stress of seeing friends move forward while you have very little choices in your life, what it means to nevertheless have to work, have to drive, and always looking over your shoulder. And these are really stressful issues in the context of growing up around other young people who are able to move forward. And so I think that certainly, or arguably, what happens in K-12 schools is arguably much more consequential to one's sense of belonging and to one's outcome later in life. And so what happens in those years, what happens inside the school, what happens in school districts, what happens in communities is really instrumental for shaping how young people feel as though, feel the ability to claim a sense of belonging to this country, their ability to move forward, to make seamless transitions from high school to college. And so for many of the young people that I studied over the years, critical to making those transitions were access to caring and trusting mentors. So adults in their lives, teachers, counselors, coaches, other people in their community, that when they're going through this really turbulent period, I think as Yemi really kind of very poignantly talked about, that they have somebody to talk to, but also that they have access to scarce resources within their schools. In California, the student to counselor ratio is almost 1,000 to 1. So what does it mean if you're undocumented, if you're having difficulty at home because of poverty issues? Oftentimes parents are very prideful and don't want their kids to air dirty laundry. And so without the ability to form trusting relationships, a lot of times, a lot of these kids fall through the cracks, right? Over the last several years, and moving back to higher ed, we've certainly seen a lot of success on college campuses, right? The creation of dreamer groups, support centers, so undocumented student centers on college campuses, staff liaisons so that undocumented students don't have to bounce around to various offices and explain in embarrassing detail often their story, right? These can be replicated in middle schools and in high schools. And around the country, a lot of schools are taking big steps towards the creation of dreamer groups, support groups for undocumented young people who can identify other people in their school in similar situation, and in the context of teachers and counselors can get help. Staff liaisons, support centers, greater awareness within the campus community. Many of my fellow panelists are doing wonderful things, and it's really just a matter of bringing greater attention to this really critical time in K-12 schools, and how do we invest early in the lives of these young people, and it's critical moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the three of you, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Does this resonate with you all, this kind of razor-thin margin between folks who end up going to college and folks who end up either dropping out of high school or really struggling when they sort of go through this difficult transition?
I can go first. I think, yeah, with a lot of the people I went to high school, A lot of my friends who, like, I remember them from class, and I just think about how capable they were and are of doing the same things that I'm doing now. And I think that the reason I'm sitting here is because I had those mentors. So I know that there's not a lot of resources and not a lot of people who know how to help a student navigate the college application process when it's, time to do that. But if we have trainings, I don't know, something to educate educators on how to do this, then there will be more of those students who have that potential tracked, because that's what's happening. I think we're being tracked into that college path instead of, being left behind. And I think too, it's the fear of, like, what your status is, and you start realizing what it means. So it's hard to stay motivated and to have hope, because there's not a lot of resources and there's not a lot of people to help. So I think educators play a big role here. So definitely the things that you guys have talked about are things that need to happen everywhere.
You're right, and that's exactly what's taking place right now in Boston. And with Boston Teachers Union, a very strong union, great union, and they're working collaboratively with us. They've now created an undocumented students learning group, and they've been in sessions and now working closer with DACA, working closer with the central office, so that we're able to make sure that we're messaging this throughout the entire district. They will be in May working with several teachers who will put a sign on their door welcoming all students, inclusion for all, inclusion for our EL students, our ELLs with disabilities, our special ed students, and our any other student that feels like they're another is going to be welcome, because that's exactly what we don't want them to feel, like you're that other box that's checked off. We want them to make sure that they understand they're a student of Boston Public Schools, and we appreciate their culture and their language and who they are and where they come from. And I bring that with me to Boston because that's my story. That's something that I went through with my family. It took my grandfather from landing in LA in 1942 to becoming a teacher when he retired at 65 years old. 50-something years to be able to get a college education. My students in Boston Public Schools don't have that time. They can't wait that long for systems to change, for politicians to figure out that they are a part of this democracy, and they deserve everything that every other student deserves in education. So that's what we're pushing strong in Boston Public Schools, to make sure that everyone's included and that those opportunities are set forth for all our students.
Fantastic. I love hearing about the partnerships that you've been able to create in Boston. It's really exciting. Richard, anything you want to add?
Yeah, actually, it was mentioned earlier, Roberto mentioned it, that many of these students, when they come to us, they're obviously in families that are economically disadvantaged, and many times that they're leaving school early to help out with finances, and they have to overcome so many obstacles, as we mentioned a number of times. But it is an exciting time, particularly because of DACA. Now, I've been at Brentwood for quite a long time, and I've seen that the transition to really a positive outcome for these students. Many years ago, when we had a bilingual student or a SIFE student, a student with interrupted formal education, their opportunities were very limited. You almost, as you mentioned, Francis, you almost checked the box. You knew how their life was going to progress. More than likely, they weren't going to graduate from high school. Probably they were going to be in a menial job for the rest of their life. The outcome was bleak. I'm actually excited now about the possibilities. They're thinking college, they're thinking secondary schools, they're dreaming big, and that's great. That's great. As we mentioned, however, there are growing pains with this, and that's where the rubber meets the road in the schools. That's what we deal with. But I am excited for the outcome, and I think there are many supports. And I agree that politicians are now bringing this out. We are having these discussions such as this, so it kind of brings to light what's needed for these students, because they're valuable. They're invaluable, really, for not just for themselves, but also for the country, for the communities in the country. So I think it's a great time for us.
You mentioned the sort of possibilities now. I mean, Yemi, can you talk a little bit about DACA and what that has meant to you, and sort of what possibilities that has opened up, and then also think about what more needs to be done here?
Yeah, I think about this all the time. I think that we can do all the things on the school leadership level and teachers, like in the classroom. We can do many, many things to make sure that our students feel welcomed, that they feel valued, and that they feel like they're going to have the opportunities that they need. But at the end of the day, for DACA students, you don't have that. I don't know how to describe it, but you only have those 2 years. I only have those 2 years. I have 2 years with a work permit, and I can work and I can drive, and I don't have to be scared of a police officer driving next to me, which the first time that I started driving, I was still scared. It was instinct, It's the fear is still there. But I think the fear now is not as much as it used to be. But if I have to sit with my mom and my dad and my siblings and have a conversation about where or who my little sister who was born here, who she would stay with if, let's say, Trump comes into the presidency and gets rid of DACA, and we have to have conversations on what would happen to her and how our family would change or whether we would be separated, then DACA is not enough. Like, I am very grateful for DACA. It's changed. It's the reason I'm in the classroom now and working for education equity for all students with Teach for America, but it's not enough. It's not gonna give us more than those 2 years. I can't ever plan ahead. And I think as a human being and as someone who's transitioning to an adult, you make those plans. Where do I want to be in 10 years? Where do I want to be in 5 years? I know where I want to be, but I can't plan for that. I have to constantly have that in the back of my head. So it's just, we need something more long-term, something more inclusive, because my parents still have to drive without a license and there's still fear for them. And so it's not enough.
Roberta, this is something that you talk about in the book too, is that for a lot of the young people that you interviewed, DACA, it almost wasn't an option for them. Even if they qualified, they didn't feel like it was enough that it would benefit them. Can you talk a little bit about what more needs to happen, and especially in the context of upcoming Supreme Court case around expanded DACA and DAPA?
Yeah, I think that just I think piggybacking off of Yemi, as Angie said earlier, more than 700,000 young people have taken giant steps towards the American mainstream. They're getting new jobs, they're increasing their earnings, they're building credit through opening bank accounts, credit cards, they're getting health care, they're driving now. And so this cannot be underscored enough, I think, what's happened in the last 3.5 years. Nevertheless, we know that DACA does not provide a pathway to legalization. At best, this is a program that is temporary and partial. And I think that also, as Yemi said, is that the young people, these young people that we're talking about today, belong to families and belong to communities, right? That really direly need some form of relief, right? And I hear that many people are projecting out to 2026, as late as 10 years from now, for some immigration reform. Certainly, DAPA would be an important step in the right direction. It certainly helped to empower families. It would certainly help to give kids and their families an important boost, a legitimacy as Americans. Many undocumented adults have been here for 10, 15 or more years, right? Really yearning to be part of this country, have worked and have sacrificed. But the measures that we're discussing today, DACA, DAPA, And on the presidential campaign trail, it also has been mentioned the detention centers, right? A lot of this is really reactive towards what has been a decade and a half of heavy enforcement. So when do we start to think about, when do we start to be more proactive about policies that really integrate immigrant kids and their families? Our policymakers say that change takes time, and that it's incremental. If we look historically, any progressive change has taken time. But these ideas don't square with the everyday worlds of kids and their families who really have to carry out their everyday lives.
So I want to pivot a little bit, and Jamie, I want to ask you, so you're a teacher and you're an artist. So can you talk a little bit about those two roles and kind of how your experience has shaped how you approach them?
Yeah, I think right now with teaching, it's my first year, so we're about to close up this year in 2 months. So I think that's kind of engulfed my life, is teaching, grading papers, all of that. So I haven't had much time to create, to make artwork. But when I came to Agnes Scott, I decided that I was going to major in studio art. And that was because I mean, it was just something that grounded me, something that was always there. And so I had moments when I was in college before DACA happened where I just stayed in my room and I was so, I don't know if I would call it depressed, but I was very, very just negative about the future and what I could do with my degree when I graduated, because there was nothing, I couldn't use it if I didn't have a social security number or permission to work. So in those moments when everything, and now I feel like a brat because as a college educated Latina, I was very privileged to be there. But I had moments like that where creating artwork was what held me down, and it was the only thing that was constant in my life. Not even my family is very supportive, but because of immigration policy, I never, especially in Georgia, it's very anti-immigrant state. And so I never knew if my family if my parents were gonna be deported or anything like that. So making artwork was always there, and I started creating self-portraits and just artwork to tell my story. And then I kind of stepped away from that as I grew as an artist and got a little bit more mature and started telling the stories of others, and my artwork transformed into kind of honoring and the sacrifices and monumentalizing the dignity and the humanity of immigrants. And so now I have plans for what I'm gonna do this summer, as far as maybe some film projects with telling the stories of the people that live in my community and immigrants as well, not just immigrants, but just kind of like where I grew up in DeKalb County on Beaufort Highway. But I'm a teacher now, but I don't know if I'm gonna be when DACA expires in 2017. So even if DACA is taken away from me, I won't be able to teach anymore, but I will still be an artist. So that's always gonna be there, and that's always gonna hold me down. And I'm always gonna be able to use that to tell the truth about what is happening here and kind of tell the human side of the story, which we don't hear about it with politics. It's so far removed.
I think it's time for maybe one more question. What I'd like to do is maybe do a quick round robin. What is the one thing that schools and districts should do that they're not doing right now?
I don't know if there's just one thing.
If you had to pick one.
To say that they're not doing, you have to be realistic. Realistically, there is a tremendous financial burden on schools. So I dream big about things that I'd love to do for the kids. But when I approach central administration for more money, I realize that that's just what it is. It's a dream. But we do have to be aware of certain things that we can do for kids. And that's what's in place now. The bilingual education and I mentioned SIFE earlier, native language arts, the ESL programs or ENL programs that are alive and vibrant in schools. Those need to be continued. We have to further look. We have to look for teachers who are duly certified now. That's obviously something that every school district is looking for. Teachers who are duly certified, for example, in we'll say social studies and ESL. And that would benefit school districts because that would be a cost savings to have a duly certified teacher in the classroom. And I know colleges and universities are going that way to help out. But also we have to recognize that socially and emotionally these students need quite a bit of help as they transition from their teen years to college and beyond, because it's not easy. As many people have already said, that it is difficult to arrive here and make your way through this system. Remember, we have to recognize too as educators that this is a whole new culture for many of the students, that is particularly that come to Brentwood High School. Many of them don't arrive to 15, 16, 17 years old. And as I say, they came from South America or similar countries, and boom, here they are in America. And in this completely different world and not speaking the same language. And sometimes I put myself in their situation as a 16, 17-year-old. If I was transported to a country I didn't speak the language, I can see the tremendous difficulties that they have. So we have to continue to be aware of that and provide supports, whether it's through guidance counselors or bilingual social workers, anything that's needed to prop them up. And obviously, if it can be cost effective, that's also something to consider.
Is there one thing that would be most effective, you think?
Well, in K-12 districts, we talk a lot about college and career readiness, and we're getting all our students prepared for college and careers. We need to make sure that our undocumented students have those opportunities too, that families of undocumented students understand that, and that there are supports for the families too for college and careers. And so we're not just having our K-12 students supported, but we're supporting the entire family, the whole child, the entire family, and creating opportunities outside of the 12th grade, making sure that we're working with universities that are able to help us fund education for our students, that we're working with big organizations that are going to give our students internships and opportunities to be able to grow. Because that's what our students want, especially our students that come at an older age. We have vocational programs for them where we're trying to align them with different companies. And what's great in Boston is that several of the companies are owned by people who attended Boston Public Schools. So they're coming back and they're supporting the efforts with college and career readiness for all our students. And I just think especially coming from a big district like I did in LA, we need to create those opportunities throughout the nation for all our students.
Great. Yemi or Roberto, anything you want to add before we turn to the audience?
Really quickly, I would just say as an educator, more training for educators on, what does it mean to be undocumented, like what is DACA, all these things, because people confuse DACA and the DREAM Act, and so, just educating our teachers and giving them the resources they might need if they find that one of their students is undocumented.
That's a great point.
So I think also really quickly, what will improve the lives of undocumented students is really what will improve the lives and the success of all students. Districts around the country are really struggling with overcrowding, struggling with issues of de facto segregation, particularly in Latino communities. And so how do we think about the move towards shrinking class sizes, reducing counselor loads, really opening up the school as a welcome place for kids as well as their parents, and really working hard to create supports for students so that they can be successful.
Great. So I think we're time for a few questions from the audience, and maybe start up here in the front.
Hi, I'm Penny Starr with CNS News. What would you say to the critics who say that Dreamers getting college scholarships and getting college entry to different colleges in the United States is competing with kids that are citizens of the United States? It's for anyone who wants to answer. Thank you.
Would you?
Roberto, do you want to start with
Yeah,
that?
sure. I think this is a fair question. It's a pretty common one. I think that all too often we get into these kinds of zero-sum arguments as though adding one person means that another person leaves or drops out or is left out. The reality is, I think that in Yemi's story and the stories of others and the hundreds of stories that I've heard, is that many of the young people that we're talking about have grown up in our communities, have gone to our schools, have grown roots, have built relationships with teachers, with employers, with their community members, and so when we divide the population of our country, when we divide the population of our community, when we divide the population of schools, who loses out is that we all lose out.
Sure. Front, thanks.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask this question in terms of money and power. Generally speaking, at least in this area, schools get their money from property taxes. They get other money, federal, but most schools get most of their money from local property taxes. And often the significant contributor to property taxes is actually commercial property or industrial property. And yet it seems that they don't weigh in on how and what they want their educational money used for. And isn't it in the interest of commercial property owners and industrial property owners to educate the least educated rather than the most educated? So my question is, in your diverse communities, do you find that commercial property owners paying a significant part of the taxes that fund schools are weighing in to educate the undocumented who are the ones cleaning their buildings and working in their shops?
I think that's also a great question. In Brentwood, in particular, you're right. I mean, the tax base actually is quite small. Most of our funding comes from state and federal government because it's a low-income area. There's not many industries there, but it's a great question because that is something the business. We do have a few businesses in Brentwood, and they do come out and speak about just what you said. They'd like to see these kids educated because many of them actually do continue on to work locally in the local businesses. So they are active as much as you would suspect, and they do encourage us to educate the students, whether they're undocumented or not.
Questions, just a reminder, when you ask your question, let us know your name and your affiliation so we know who we're talking to. Other questions? Yeah.
I mean, given the political situation in this country, do you think any of these things are actually possible in terms of, a path to citizenship, an extension of the DACA and DAPA programs going into the future, and how can we deal with those types of issues? Mike Golash, the Amalgamated Transit Union.
Thank you. That's a great question. Anybody want to tackle the politics here?
Well, I think that this, moving forward, how close are we to a comprehensive immigration reform? I don't know. What might happen in the Supreme Court, I think looks fairly positive. DACA has been a huge success, and so extending that, not taking it away, maybe I'm still too optimistic and too idealistic, but I just don't see, even in the change of presidency during the next administration, it being taken away. But I think that said, I think that what many of us have said today is that certainly in the absence of any action at the federal level, where most of what's important, and that is people's everyday lives, really the balance lays really in the hands of social workers, of teachers, of counselors, of principals, of healthcare workers, right? All of these local level actors that play a critical role in people's everyday lives, right? As kids and their families continue to wait while Congress debates their futures, right? Is they've got to carry out their lives, and who best equipped to address everyday needs are those folks at the local level. So we really have to, I think that moving forward after this election, I think that a lot of the attention, a lot of the resources really need to go locally.
And if I could just say, DACA didn't happen because the president felt good that day. Like, DACA happened because there was a lot of pressure put on the administration by organizations, by groups of students who are fighting for this cause. And so I think we have to really, especially if you are fighting for the same things we're fighting for, you have to really look around you and see what's going on in the schools and, you know, with your leadership, your local representatives and everything like that, to see where you can advocate, where you can weigh in. Because I think, I'm not an expert, but I think that a lot of the deportations that have happened during Obama's administration have happened because of local anti-immigrant laws. So I mean, we can talk all day about when is this going to happen, but I think it's really going to take us all coming together across gender, across, you know, race and any other identities to work together and make this happen for the future of this country.
I can answer that also just a little bit. I mean, if you're wondering, as the principal of a high school that's grown so dramatically in such a short period of time, I actually don't really. I try not to think about that too much. To tell you the truth, I mean, I realize obviously the change in administration, things can happen, but really what we're charged with doing, you know, what I'm charged with doing is educate any student who arrives on, you know, at our doors. And that's really what I focus on. And that's the reality right now. I mean, the reality is school districts like Brentwood and urban areas like New York and Boston, they are going to continue to grow, and many of them with you know, undocumented students. How do we educate them? That's the only question I ask myself every day. I really don't think about the policy or what could potentially happen down the road.
And let me tag on to that. As civil servants, because that's really who we are, we come from that place of looking for opportunity every day, waking up, trying to figure out what other opportunities can we offer to our students. Not so much what opportunities is this next president going to take away. Of course, we don't want anything to be taken away, but you know, the racism for our students, and we want to make sure that, you know, we're not feeding that we're not bound to that in any way. So whatever happens, our students, all students, receive an opportunity every day from civil servants that work for public schools.
If I can come back, I don't know if it's fair for me to answer twice. But you know, this year, 2016, marks the 15th anniversary of the initial introduction of the DREAM Act in 2001. And so much of our conversation is forward thinking, right? Is what's going to happen in the future? When are we going to pass an immigration bill? What's it going to look like? What are we going to do? What's going to happen in the future? But I think that certainly in informing what happens in the future, we've got a lost decade and a half under extreme enforcement and stalled congressional action. And the lives of many of these young people who in 2001 were the intended beneficiaries of the DREAM Act, right? Those who were in high school, those who were starting college, right? Who are now in their early 30s, mid-30s, like many of the respondents in my book, right? Over the years, these policies, right, stalled congressional action and heavy enforcement have really worn a lot of people down, and I think that we've got a lot to learn from these failed policies of the last decade and a half.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Yeah.
I'm wondering, you've all talked about bilingual education, and I wonder if you could speak to somewhat of a controversy of whether you're doing students a favor with that, because historically students have been put into learn by immersion, and it's painful for that year, but it's tended to be successful.
Francis or Richard,
Sure.
do you want to
this
one?
Start? Yeah, I think that's a valid question, and it's you know, one that's brought up quite frequently, and it's one that I struggle with you know, quite a bit. I'm in New York, as you know, and there are quite a few changes to the law in New York over the last year in particular, but over the last 10 years there's been quite a bit of changes that that have caused us to obviously look at bilingual education. Now, so the question is, you know, does immersion work as opposed to bilingual? And to be honest with you, I've actually kind of changed myself. In the beginning, probably about 10 years ago, when we went to this model, I wondered if the immersion, you know, just drop the kid in the class and a year later they'll be speaking English. And certainly there were a lot of success stories that you look at that and it worked for a lot of kids. But I think historically it didn't work for a majority of kids. So what I've seen, and I've kind of changed over the years, I actually see I see bilingual education with native language arts supports is actually being a very successful model. So I'd actually say that I've changed. But that doesn't mean that it wouldn't work for some kids. But I do think what we're trying to do, you know, in terms of bilingual education, I think is really working for the majority of kids. I think what will eventually happen is we'll have to find out what will work in terms of finances as districts and states, and you know, without spending a tremendous amount of money, but just the right amount of money and giving the proper supports. But I don't think immersion, where you just drop kids into you know, an English-speaking class and a year later they come out and they're well adjusted and they're ready to march forward. I think it would work for some, but not for the vast majority.
And what we offer is structured English immersion with a language-specific strand. So whatever language the students, native language, whatever language they come in with, they are supported with their language, their native language, throughout until they're able to transfer into being immersed into the English classroom. We also offer dual language programs. We also support our students with limited and interrupted formal education by providing them their core content in their language, in their native language, while also giving them the English as a second language supports. So we don't just push them into, you're either going to learn English or you're going to be in a bilingual program. We have even done away with the label of bilingual, but what we do want to produce is biliterate students that are able not just to speak a second language, or English as their second language, or multilingual, but to be able to read and write in it.
Well, thank you all for these great questions. Before we close, just want to remind folks that we have copies of Roberto's book, Lives in Limbo, out back for sale, and I think we're going to make sure he has a Sharpie to autograph some in case you would like a signature. So yeah, please join me in thanking these amazing panelists and Dr. Viola and Sanchez for being here. It was just a fantastic discussion. We look forward to continuing the conversation and supporting you all in all your great work. So thank you.